The NFL Combine is here. What's the Dynasty utility? That and more this week on Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, it's a big week for the Underwear Olympics and for the data miners. But what about Dynasty GMs? What should we be paying attention to, and what is potentially overrated?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of overdo it with the whole Underwear Olympics aspect of this week. It's interesting because I thought in prior years, like we already had measurement stuff. Like it's like Tuesday. I thought we got measurements early on, but I've been like sort of anxiously waiting that. It looks like by the schedule, it's going to come out Thursday, which is the same day they measure, do all their testing. So at least for the first day. So that's an interesting, I think, and a change from prior years. I do think you got to be, you have to be attentive to the idea that this is going to change the market perception on players, and it might change them quickly. So if you're thinking Devy, right? If you're in a Devy league, if you're thinking you have picks as well, right? Picks might become more in demand now that you see some of these guys out there running around and doing that. It's going to bring more players front of mind and change people's opinions. So I think all that's in play. But I'd be cautious about overreacting. I mean, we're team underreact, right? We're team sort of, tempered enthusiasm, right? Or, to use your phrase, I think that's I think how you should treat this week. And if you find yourself really overreacting, like be careful on that, because it shouldn't change your profile opinions that much. It's really what it affects more is, I think, draft capital. And then once you sort of get into the, if a guy runs fast, he's more likely to be drafted higher. But that, if it's puts him in the second round, right? The second round guys perform about the same independent of speed. So that's how it really affects people, more so than really anything else.
Yeah, I would parse out the positions in one simple way, which is that running backs, the size, speed, movement, the more physical position, I would argue, where those traits matter. The physical and athletic attributes matter more. I would say we've learned countless times with the wide receivers who were highly productive in college. I'm thinking Keenan Allen. I'm thinking guys like Jarvis Landry, where the workouts, they were still drafted high enough when you say that they bombed or did not perform well enough. And Michael Thomas, another one, they did not perform well enough with their testing to kind of get thrown by the wayside, that they're not going to be able to hang. I remember DeAndre Hopkins, being viewed in that fashion. But when they have the production and they have enough pedigree, they've got to stay on your radar. And I know, something in the 4.5s does not really move the needle. It doesn't make you quake in your boots as a wide receiver like DK Metcalf or Julio Jones types. But keep in mind, if they were highly productive, especially at 18, 19 years old in college, that matters. So I would say if they produce well and they aren't big-time athletes, it probably means they have those integral skills like separating, working their hands, running routes, separating. Again, think guys like Keenan Allen, Jarvis Landry, who have been doing it for a number of years. And frankly, we can say that they're outliers, but we've had a number of them that are highly productive, but yet they really don't move the needle athletically, and yet they've been long-term fantasy and NFL starters.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think where you see one of the big benefits is like where you get to sort of go against, right? Where you're making that bet, right? Which is, you see guys in a range where, if two guys of the same draft pedigree are very close, and one runs faster, one tests better, right? All those things, and there opens up a gap in cost that's really exploitable, right? Which is, I think, especially if they have a better production profile and the like from college. So, yeah, I do think, and this is, it's fun, right? I'm really ramping up the preparation this week too. Like, this is really on top of the fact that free agency is going to come, like trades are coming. Like, I think this is a big week for really kind of turning the page and upping the ante on the off season. And I think you have to think about that in existing teams too.
Yeah. If you're going on vacation, I said June is a very good time. And the right after the Super Bowl, or heck, even watching the Super Bowl from a cruise ship or on vacation or whatever your venue of choice. But February is not a bad month to also dedicate time elsewhere. They always talk about the window opportunity if you're trying to watch football all day on a Sunday or college football on a Saturday. You kind of need to, do some errands or do some things with family and put your value judgments to say, I've earned this, so that might be Saturday morning, and it might be, foregoing some part of the slate. But part of the calendar, Dynasty NFL-wise, definitely February is a little on the lighter side. And yeah, so this is a busy one. And I would just say the other thing is don't double count. whether a guy that you didn't think was going to test well doesn't, or a guy that you figured to be a freak and he is. That could definitely, as you said, move the marketplace, move the public perception. But yet it doesn't really change anything. They pretty much check the box there.
Right. Yeah, just don't De'Runnya Wilson yourself, right? Just don't do, right? And you're trying to avoid a lot of those things, right? Just trying to avoid like horrible
blast outcomes from the past. Yeah, 4.7, not that great. And you know what? George Pickens, looking right at you.
The other thing too is like, as you're sitting here right now, like this is a prime cash out opportunity if you have Devy players too, right? Like if there's and maybe there's not
worried.
What's that?
If you're worried.
Yeah. And I mean, like, there's been guys along the way that this has happened to. It happened a couple of years to somebody that Auden Tate was thinking, there was some thoughts that he might be a first round pick at this point, and he just plummeted. Some other guys that have had this happen, De'Runnya Wilson's a good example. There's other guys that have had this happen. If you have a Devy guy and it's sort of up there in terms of what his projected cost, the only thing that really can happen for him, if assuming that he's sort of at a peak price right now, a first round valuation, anything that can happen is bad. So you do have to think about, and even if he gets all the way through and makes it through, gets in a first round spot, like still it's a 50-50 bet. So you have to sort of measure, I think right now, if there is guys that you're particularly worried about or that you can sort of cash out and avoid sort of, wading through that swamp of bad things that can happen. I think that this is a time to do it. And, you still have time as of this recording, you still have time to do it. I think thinking about those things is one other way to try and avoid some of the pitfalls that can come from this.
One ancillary question I would ask is the concept of startup drafts. We've rolled over on a lot of the platforms 2022, and that means startup drafts are going, but yet a lot of times before the NFL draft, you have rookie picks, stock 101, 102, etc. How do you feel about drafting those, the insulation factor, versus if you're in a league where you're drafting individual rookies in your startup draft?
Well, you roster the picks ahead of the individual rookies, right? Because you have right that pick doesn't run a 4.9, right? That the pick doesn't fail a urine test, right? The pick doesn't get arrested, right? The pick doesn't fall in the draft. It doesn't get drafted to a bad landing spot, right? So you have all those things that doesn't have happen to it. It's insulated, it's liquid, right? You've got all of those things. So you draft, I think you have to be aggressive on the picks at this point. The other thing, you were always good with this in terms of asking yourself the question, like, would you trade this player for this pick? Right? I mean, just in an existing league, and that doesn't seem super high level until you start seeing people make the wrong side of those decisions when you're like, all right, well, what was your process there? And well, I didn't think of it that way. Well,
I think Gabriel Davis over 110. Well, you did exactly that. You had that choice in the startup draft, so now 100%. We know what you think.
100%. And you have to avoid that because it becomes a different marketplace. It can be a little bit disorienting. And remember, whatever rookie 110 is, right? The pick is more valuable than that because it might be a better pick, right? It might be, you might be able to package it in a trade, right? You might be able to do all those things. And I do think this time of year as well, that picks are going to be more valuable in a couple of months. I know that people are like, oh, the class is down. Like the class is down until you get the excitement of like wanting to pull the trigger on a pick, right? Like that sounds great in theory. And then everything we know about human psychology is like right when you get the opportunity, it's like to make the pick. Everyone wants to make the pick. And, is it the same as prior years? No. But is it like this horrible landscape that everyone's kind of making it out to be? No. And I think it'll be more valuable as you go along too. So, I mean, I think playing that game right now makes a little sense too. And there's a lot of bad things that can happen to existing veteran players from now until, May as well. So I would just be cautious on that. I think being liquid with picks, and then, you can always trade them for existing players later on down the line.
Yeah. I love that, thinking about the next 3 months and saying, what's the worst case outcome? Well, some of it is drafting individual rookies, and some of it is drafting shaky profile or up in the air with free agency, whether that's someone coming onto their depth chart or they're leaving for someone else's in NFL free agency. So how do you avoid that? The individual rookie picks are ones that are insulated from all those factors. And frankly, it's the only thing in that rookie draft, other than maybe trading down or trading for future picks, that are truly insulated at this time of year. Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 93 of the Footballguys Dynasty Show. Jordan, we're within 2 months hitting 100. Hitting 100. The century mark is a big deal, I've heard. So I do want to mention Jordan is sported almost every week here, but if you want to look like a champion, get that Footballguys official gear and merchandise. You can go over at shop.footballguys.com. Quality designs, materials. You get that Black Eyed Joe logo. You got hats, shirts, outerwear, coffee cups, everything you need to really support the brand that you know, you love, you trust there with Joe Bryant and company at footballguys.com. We got a bunch of trades to talk strategy, team building, player-wise. I've got a few FFPC. We're going to start out with a stock format here, which is Calvin Ridley, really a tough to value and tough to assess player because he goes beyond football. So him with his mental health basically was a non-factor for the games he did play this year, and then we didn't see him again. So Ridley and Pat Freiermuth for Devonta Smith and 106.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's interesting because I think Smith is probably going ahead of Ridley in drafts, and then you take the pick over Freiermuth would sort of be my thought. The problem is I would rather have a healthy Ridley, right? Like I'd rather have a ready to go Ridley than Devonta Smith. So I think that this is an interesting one in terms of there's probably other ways to do this deal, right? I could be on the flip side of this, on the non-Ridley side, and be convinced to do it if it was, if it was maybe someone equivalent to Devonta Smith, but not Devonta Smith. Does that make sense? I mean, I think you're making, for example, like in that range, Mike Evans is going cheaper, but like that not far from there is like a guy like Stephon Diggs. You know what I mean? Like I think that range of the position matters. I would rather have a ready to go Ridley than Devonta Smith. But the price point I think is interesting. So I think it's a complicated trade. I would wonder, if you're going to make this, can you make it a little bit differently? Would sort of be the way that I would come down on it.
I would add one thing, which is careful not to overvalue tight ends if you don't think they have an elite ceiling. And I'm pointing out Pat Freiermuth as a guy that fits that profile. And if you're arguing Ridley and Smith even in the same neighborhood, that Freiermuth versus 106 is a bloodbath. So 106, whether you like the class and it's not super flex and whatever, it still has a lot of power in the trade market to trade down, get a future first, or you can get a player you like. So that part to me, I would say you go, I want to get, well, you didn't really get younger. You went Smith to Ridley, but you got Freiermuth. It's the cornerstone guy. Careful with that kind of talk because tight end, keep in mind, to get into the top 3 or 4, you got to bump some big boys out. So that it's not really, it's kind of like quarterback. It's tough to crack the top of the position right now. And so just be careful because your guy, Freiermuth, could have an uptake from what we saw. And he's still kind of languishing at 8 and 12. Right. And yet he made progress. He looks the part through a couple seasons, but he still doesn't quite have it.
Totally. Right. I mean, the amount of tight ends that make a difference is right. You hit it. It's a handful, right? I think literally it's a handful.
Chad's baby hands. Baby T-Rex arms and hands.
Baby and then 6 through 15, 6 through 16, whatever. Yeah. There's minimal bets in there that are very different. So
don't pay tight end 7 prices when you can pay tight end 20 prices for the guy.
Correct.
You do is under 13 type stuff.
Right.
If everyone followed along in that gobbledygook. Well, when you look sideways, it's really looking left or right, but it's really about up and down. You see what I'm saying? All right. So FFPC, and what I love about this is it's super flex deal involving no quarterback picks. Genius. Gabriel Davis for Mike Gesicki. It does have factors on roster size and kind of how you compose things. So Gabriel Davis, one of your boys up in Buffalo there, he is hot this offseason because apparently they're cutting everybody at the position. And we got Mike Gesicki, free agent tight end.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gesicki is as good as franchise tagged, would sort of be my thought. I think he's back with Miami. And I don't think he's like that. I don't think he's great at anything, but he gets enough volume to sort of, again, he fits that same tier, right? I think what you just said, like, just if as a mental exercise, take tight ends 6 through through 15, rank them, go eat dinner, come back on a new piece of paper, rank them, and it's going to be totally different.
No, just start drawing stuff out of a mug and just be like, oh, that looks all right. That's how my rankings look today.
Right.
No, and then start asking yourself, does one guy cost the first and one guy cost the third?
Right. Totally. Yeah.
But let me ask you this.
Sure.
You're going to access in FFPC, especially Superflex, where every roster spot is like trying to get water in a desert. Would you rather have an excess wide receiver, or would you rather have Gesicki, even if you have a stronger tight end as your tight end too? Which is less egregious in the landscape of roster composition?
I think I'd rather have Gesicki. And the reason I'd rather have Gesicki is because if you have an elite tight end, right, that might be more attractive, right? You can make. Yeah, I mean, he could be flexible, right? I mean, you could play him in the flex if depending on your roster construction as well. So, I mean, I'd rather have the tight end there. I like Gabe Davis as a player, but there are just so many wide receivers that blend in when you're.
Well, let's see how you feel about him in May, because Buffalo, without Emmanuel Sanders, who they got this time of year last year, is someone that, it was going to be Gabriel Davis a year ago. Nope, right. We want a 34-year-old Emmanuel Sanders.
Right.
And even if they get rid of Beasley and Sanders, that probably means they're doing something, if not multiple things at the position. So you kind of have to wait on that and see how you feel with what they invested at the position.
Right.
And Gesicki's a little more insulated, like you said. Whether he goes in free agency, franchise tag, you kind of know what you got, which is a guy that's flexible, might be your tight end one, and at minimum, a guy that you can justify as your number 2 tight end and keep him on your roster. Gabe Davis, you might say, well, I made this trade for him, so I got to keep him, and it might not make sense in October.
Totally. Can I pitch you a potential landing spot? Allen Robinson to the Bills. I've heard that his market price is going to be down cheaper than we might otherwise expect, and I think that if you're going to do kind of a 1 year, I don't know if it's necessarily ring chasing for this point in his career, but I do think that would be he might find a more tepid spot. Yeah, there
are plenty of free agents out there at wide receiver that should make you move off of some level of Gabriel Davis exuberance for some massive. He's going to be a top 24 guy. Watch this, and they still have a developing and frankly it was a great bounce back year for Devin Singletary. They've got Dawson Knox. They've got Diggs. It's not like they don't have anybody already. So I would just say be careful. And yes, an offense like a Josh Allen offense is one that you want the wide receiver to. But to assume that Davis is that guy is the part that I would say press the brakes a little. All right, we got another FFP says one quarterback, and this is Noah Fant for JuJu Smith-Schuster and a 23 second.
So he's another one that's going to be. I mean, it's going to be interesting from again the tight end perspective of this. It's just you could just do all of these.
Can he get home? Yes.
Right. Yeah. It's all of these. But then the question is what difference does JuJu make? I mean, these aren't they? It's just a different.
And what difference does the second make? Rhythm. And does the second carry a lot of weight?
Right. This is the same. It's kind of the same deal. And you just look at when you look at patterns, a lot of these trades are just the same pattern, right? And so you kind of have to, I think I'd rather break and just as a general matter, go up, right? Pay, Fant in a second for, can that get you Waller, or can it get you right up to the next? Can that get you Kelsey, right? I would rather go that direction, especially in FFPC, right? You're constantly going up that direction would sort of be my thought, just my general premise. I'd see these a lot of times as lateral moves. Again, I think I'd probably rather have Fant because it can allow you to do some different things roster construction wise, but and JuJu is I don't really know what type of market reception he's going to get or what type of target role that he could go into that would make a big time difference. So that's sort of my pause there. But again, as a general rule, I think you want to be moving up instead of laterally. I think a lot of these trades are laterally.
And the twist is they got the second in this one, which is, we're not going to throw it away, but it's also one that can be a little bit of a trap, in terms of what you do with that pick. And especially if you pick a rookie in what position, it can kind of trap you in and almost be a net negative. So you got to be careful with that second. And so it's kind of in the Gabriel Davis, Gesicki realm, but obviously it's a little bit higher end with the names involved there.
Right.
And so it feels like the second you're just going to kind of bank that one. But I do have longer term lens for Noah Fant, even if I have a lot of Denver concerns about the upside of any particular player this coming year. So I think the same thing is that JuJu Smith-Schuster, you might get into the season and you just kind of view it as, well, he's my wide receiver 5 or 6, and it's like, what are we doing here? You're looking around, you're doing the Justin Herbert. I don't know what's happening. We got one more FFPC here. We got Kadarius Toney and 201 for a 23 first.
Yeah, this is going to test your 2023 first.
Is it?
You know, how elite it is. Listen, I will say this. I think that there's probably other ways to take a bet on Kadarius Toney than to do this deal. But I'm interested in taking a bet on Kadarius Toney. But I think if you told me that there's going to be a huge breakout from his cost, I would pick him. Right. I just think that that's what his profile looks like through 197 routes. Like, it's not a lot, but that's kind of what the profile looks like, is an elite early start. And that's what he did. Again, small sample size caveats apply, but that's what it looked like. That's a bet you want to take at his cost. I don't think that's a first round rookie pick. So I'd take the rookie pick. But I'm very much interested in the Kadarius Toney, buying a Kadarius Toney share, but this seems like you're buying.
He's going about the same price he was last year, right? Which is, he was undervalued in rookie drafts when you look at a first round wide receiver fading through that range. And then, like you just said, he had 189-yard game or something. I mean, he had moments, and it was fleeting. Like you just said, it was less than 200 routes. This was not a big sample size. But the Jets, same thing. Giants were an S show last year. And you say around one guy that showed something early on and showed enough that you say, what, the price is the same? We actually got some positive vibes from the first year to say that he's not on a bus track, or at least we're pretty darn sure it's a bus track. So there's a lot of positive. I would ask you, like, is this viewing him like a late second kind of valuation within the construct of this deal? I do think 201, this isn't the year that you're going to be able to get a first or 201 in the draft itself. Like, it's going to be one of those where you got to trade maybe 9, 10, 11 to get a future first. The perception of it, at least right now. We'll see if there's going to be some rogue deals in draft to be able to do that. But if Toney, I'll just say this, if Toney isn't a big uptick player and basically your weekly starter, I think this is you take that first so quick, so hard, and don't even look back, because we know this can turn into 101. Like, good luck projecting how FFPC rookie picks turn out. So I think you take the first, and it feels relatively cheap, because I'm sure Toney is not projected for your lineup at present. And you get 201 in a start one. So I just think it's a pretty smash. And I did think you highlighted the positives for Toney and what could happen this year. Well,
yeah, and I think the other way to look at this is what you pay a future first for, right? Like, as a general rule of thumb, I won't give one unless I'm getting a top 30 pick or a top 30 player, right? I think that's a pretty good guardrail to not.
What if you're getting 2 top 120 players? What if you're getting 2 of those, though?
But see, I mean, and that's like, and
what if I assume it's 112 next year?
Yeah, you have to guard against that. But you have, like, you can trade it at any point, right? And that's the other thing, is like, you can. That might
better get a hammer throw.
That might be Devonta Adams, right? Like, you better
get a hammer throw.
Yeah, you would be really, really surprised about what that pick is going to net.
Just look at the teams last in the standings and say, who's your best player?
Right.
Over the age of 25. I want him. That guy.
I have a pick.
Start waving money. Benjamin's right here. Here's what you want. I got it. You don't. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what you do in season. And like you said, you got to get an auto start player. And Toney, we don't know. 201, we certainly don't know. And
right.
This is exactly what you don't want to do, which is trade it, 14 months out.
Right.
Where you don't even know how good your team is. Where's that pick? I don't know. Late. I'm awesome. Nope. Wrong answer.
Right.
Last one. We got a 12-team super flex, so we can stretch our elbows, expanded rosters here. I thought this was interesting. So the team last place finish gave up CeeDee Lamb, Tyler Boyd, and a fourth for Cooper Kupp. So getting older, and this other team wasn't that great either. They didn't make the playoffs. So what do you think about Lamb a plus for Kupp?
You got to be really bad to have not made the playoffs and had Cooper Kupp last year. Like that would be the initial salvo thing that I would say about that.
Right.
I don't know if I would. So I guess I'd want to know a little bit more about why you were like in last place last year. Again, if we were going to go straight for Kupp to Lamb, like if you're a contending team, I kind of, over the next, if I'm sort of valuing the next 2 years pretty highly, I could say, yeah, we could do that. I think that there's probably other pivots to make in what you're instantly doing by being a team that wasn't good. You're kind of forcing yourself into must be good right now. And that can force a lot of errors, right? That can force a lot of errors. And wide receiver isn't a place that is the surest bet to make your team better, right? So again, if Cooper,
give yourself some outs, right? The thing I don't like is if Kupp, who again saw such a big workload this year, he had a magical year, and it doesn't take much for him to slide down a little bit. Whether that's missing a few games, whether that is just a few drops or touchdown regression, or the Rams and aren't quite as magical. Like there's so many factors that go into that, but you have no outs. And it's not that we're team CeeDee Lamb by any stretch, and not that Boyd or the fourth matters. But it feels like if you really want to let me build up my team, and I think what you're saying is how about you go Lamb for a wide receiver that can still be 27, 28, 29 years old? That's fine. But how about you get that and two other things that actually matter, like a first-round pick, just in case you're wrong, and come awesome again or whatever. And then you also get, a running back with some upside, or, with pedigree, or, you know what I'm saying? Like it feels like instead of going 3 for 1, it's pretty weak 3 for 1. It's essentially 1 for 1. How about you go 1 for 3 and don't get Cooper Kupp? You get, like we've said before, Mike Evans, or you get Keenan Allen, who's a similar age, but you say, well, let me get Keenan Allen plus a running back I can start, plus a pick upgrade or of significance. And now you say, I can rebuild my team, and I had some injuries last year, and I wasn't great at setting my lineup or whatever. And you're like, I wasn't that far away from making the playoffs, and I'm going to turn CeeDee Lamb into 2 or 3 things. I think that's the way you would do it, or like you said, what if you try to go from Lamb to Jefferson? Like, what's that cost?
Right.
So anyway, there's just some ideas in general.
Yeah, I like that, and I think the way you put together this deal, like what you're trying to, I'm surprised that that this deal accomplishes what either team is trying to accomplish, right? Like I'd be really surprised. It doesn't seem particularly well aimed at achieving their outcome.
Aimless. It's aimless.
Correct. Yeah, it's just firing a shotgun in the air, hoping to hit something, and it just doesn't. That's right. Where like you said, like the pivot from Kupp to Keenan Allen is a good idea. The pivot from from that to I joke about the pivot from CeeDee Lamb to Brandon Cooks and 2 firsts, right? And that would have been a point difference last year, right? Like,
if you're going older, get cheaper, get much cheaper.
Right.
Like you were just saying, what if you went with what you view as maybe a cornerstone tight end? If you're weak there, right. A pick plus getting like Brandon Cooks. So you're addressing a lot of different things there, and you're still staying in the old wide receiver business. That's fine. It's absolutely fine to go Lamb to an older wide receiver, but you got to do different. And Kupp, let's face it, you got no wiggle room, right? He basically just had the career year.
Right.
What are the odds? Like he pretty much, Lamb doesn't even need to do anything. Like he's gonna pass and be far beyond Kupp basically from this point forward, probably just because of age. And just general profile and market dynamics. So you got to be very careful. Very careful.
Yes.
All right. Reminder about joining the daily email update there by Joe Bryant. Hold all the news this time of year. Again, you want to figure out what's going on in NFL free agency, the trading market with those quarterbacks potentially on the move. You need to be on top of it, and you can find that on the top right side of the Footballguys.com homepage for all of the news you need, plus highlighting all that off-season content we've got going at Football Guys to keep you diving into the site. Got some quotes from the Football Guys Dynasty Forum this week. First one, general rule of thumb. 4 throw pillows. If you have nowhere to sit, you have 2 minutes. And ancillary,
especially if you have kids under 5.
Exactly. I like Joe Burrow over Justin Herbert.
I don't. Here's the problem with that. Herbert's done it twice. Burrow's done it once. Burrow just did it at the height of what you could hope for his efficiency to be. Led the league in touchdown passes over 40 yards, right? That's something that doesn't repeat. That's not something you continuously do. And at the same time, didn't produce close to Herbert. So you do all those things and you say, all right, why would you, right? You're taking, you're taking 2 guys that are, again, I think Herbert's even above Burrow. So it's not even fair to Herbert to do this, but it's almost like you're taking a guy on a higher floor, right? And they're both getting into an elevator and one's going down and one's going up. And you're like, all right, which one would you take? Like you take Herbert, right? I mean, it's not even, to me, I think the Burrow love has gotten too far, right? And we've gone, and I like Joe Burrow. Like he's an entertaining player. I think Cincinnati's an entertaining story, even though, we won't talk about the Bills, but what I think you're missing is that, I think a lot of the Joe Burrow stuff is due for some regression. And you just can't score touchdowns at that length at a consistent rate and get away with it, right? And that's what he depended on for a quarterback, 8 finish in our points, right? That's what he finished. And by the way, over at footballguys.com, you can find all the things, you can sort out all the stuff. There was a difference in 2.1 points between Herbert and Burrow again, and that is Burrow performing basically at the height of his efficiency and Herbert kind of performing in his range of expectations. You take Herbert 100 times over at that point.
Didn't you say, and maybe this was Herbert compared to somebody else, but did you say like since high school that, or this is probably, also just me thinking about it. I mean, Burrow has been better than Justin Herbert 1 year since high school. That's
true. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because Herbert came out as he was from a very early age at Oregon, was like a really high end quarterback. I remember you and I were doing college football watch shows back then. And I was like, my God, you got to see the arm on this Oregon kid. Right? Like
6'5" guy that can move and got a howitzer. And
right.
It didn't always turn into great results, but like you saw the toolsy stuff. And these first 2 years, year 1 in the NFL, Herbert better. Year 2, Herbert better. I mean, so we're still waiting. And like you just said, there's some regressionary things going on with Burrow. And you can say, we set up with these 2 monster wide receivers. Life is good. It's only going to get better. Well, Herbert's been doing it with the whole mess of stuff,
Yeah.
And a lot of these games, the defense has been pretty horrible, and it's all on him. So, I mean, and the rushing. Let's not to mention the rushing upside, which is more pronounced with Herbert, who didn't really do it in year 1. And what happens in year 2? He turns into a fantasy stud by running a little bit more. Thank goodness. Getting a few touchdowns, Herbie. That's what we need. Right. How old is Jordan to be rummaging through legal pads on the show for his notes? Was he born in the 1960s?
How old am I? I'm 34. I'll be 35 next month. Listen, there's a lot of legal pads around my. I actually have gone to the spiral notebook.
When you go to law school, do they just give you a truckload of them and entire pack of legal pads? Like, and they'd be like on the nose, little too on the nose.
Yeah, I mean it's you get it. I have found that they're not particularly well organized, so I have gone to the spiral notebook with some stuff.
Why are they yellow?
Why
are they yellow? Notebook. I do find the legal pads on the top, they really stay together well.
Yeah,
they're really firmly built on the top. That's good news.
Yes.
The problem for me is I use the little I collect all those things from hotels. I love those pins, by the way. The cheap 20-cent print on the side pins that are regular Bics. I don't like the clicky ones. I literally like the ones with a lid. And the other thing is those little notepads from hotels. Well, they're all different sizes. Some of them are big ones, but I take those every single time.
Chad's way older. Like he's already doing this stuff about like,
I know.
he's like
Oh, you
hoarding.
take the shampoo.
Like,
I'm like Ross at the Apple cabin. You take all this stuff. Where's all the maple candy? Right. You take all of these. Like we take the light. You can't take the lamp, but you can take the light bulbs. I like the way you're thinking. We got Mike Gesicki is one of my favorite players in tight end premium best ball. In leagues where you submit a lineup, he's one of about 15 guys I wouldn't mind starting if I don't have a better tight end, which is a lot of the things you actually said analyzing that trade.
Yeah, I mean, they all just kind of blend together, right? And like he's fine, right? But again, Hunter Henry, if he's going, 7 rounds later, isn't terribly different, right? It's not really going to change your price. And so has been a strategic change of mine. Is more I've studied this, in AOD. I sort of looked at this and I was like, my God, like the drop off at tight end, it's like a straight down roller coaster, right? You're just like straight down.
You start 2 players with one of the top
guys. Yeah, and so it's worth to pay up for, right? I mean, it's worth it to have an Andrews. Yeah, and it's worth it to go out if you're right now and you're contending. Like it is worth it to go get Kelsey because he can make a difference, even if he retires at the end of the year, right? Like there's not a ton of downside to it. So I do think that that's very true in terms of like looking at tight ends, constantly thinking about going up the board. It does matter a little bit different, in tight end. I did a study a couple of years ago where it was basically like if you scored a touchdown, you like 70% of the time a touchdown, a tight end was a best ball, was a top 12 guy or something like that. Like it was a really, really high number. So, a lot of that becomes just scoring touchdowns, right? So I think that
4 touchdowns, 4 catches is a massive game. Yeah.
Right.
All right. I see some upside, but Kadarius Toney seems like someone who will always be an ancillary piece and not a team's number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. Like that may be true. And like, but I've really embraced, again, if we sort of go themes of the show, I've really embraced guys that can make a difference, right? And do I think Kadarius Toney is more likely to fail than succeed? Yes. Right? Like I think if you told me in 3 years, like, hey, he never really did anything, like that wouldn't shock me. I think that's probably what I would bet on happening. However, when you look at his profile, right, when you look at what he did as a rookie, and you just judge that, and you say, okay, like what does that have signals of? It has signals of an elite production profile. Like that's what it signals. Is there a lot of landmines that he could step on along the way? Yes. Is there a lot of dangerous things that can happen, right? In terms of he wasn't necessarily the cleanest prospect off the field, right? All of those things, yes. But I think from his cost, like that's the bet to make, right? That's 100% the bet to make from that deep at the position. You look at some other guys at the position that are going around him. I mean, a guy like Jerry Jeudy doesn't have that ceiling. I don't think he does, right? You're looking at guys like, like Gabe Davis, for example. I don't think Gabe Davis is ever going to change the world. Kadarius Toney might not, but he's got a better chance of doing it than I think Gabe Davis does. You look at some other guys like, like Hunter Renfrow. Like, you know what I mean? I just think the bet that you want to make sort of at that range, like make a huge difference bet. Like him and Michael Thomas present bets that could make a huge difference from that cost, which would be guys that I'd be really interested in.
Yeah, Kadarius Toney was in the top 80 in adjusted points per game, and you'd rather be in the top 40, 45, obviously. It really boosts your odds out of year one. But he's in the top 80, which means he did not fall on his face, and he's at least avoided that. The versus Jerry Jeudy thing, one thing I would notate is, some of these prospects, some of these younger players in the NFL still on the developmental curve, when you can get them further insulated, like Jerry Jeudy, this is a pivotal year. I mean, if he Myers in the 50s and 60s again, I mean, this is going to be no bueno. People are going to fall off the map. There's still plenty of believers. But Kadarius Toney basically a similar season in seasonal finish, year one, to Jeudy, but doesn't have that building profile in a negative way through year two. He kind of gets a freebie season on top of that, which is good news of saying whether he can or can't. And he's going to get a little bit of a pass just because he didn't have the appeal of Jeudy coming out, and Giants have been a fire in terms of their quarterback. Obviously, this past year with Toney playing, not playing, but then also starting Mike Glennon and others. at quarterback. So just nothing really working there. Denver viewed a lot more higher regard. And that doesn't say a whole lot because it was Teddy Bridgewater infused. All right, we got one more.
One other thing I would just say, and just so I could highlight the reason why I'm sort of on Kadarius Toney, 2.14 yards per route run. That is 97th percentile in terms of career number of guys over 200. Again, he was just short of that. So he had 200, or he had 197. He was targeted on 27.04% of his targets. That is the top 1 percentile in terms of that stat. Right? That is an elite, a small sample size, but elite production. And even I will say this.
Who's scared you? Kenny Galladay?
Right. And the other thing too is like we've seen this with Brian Daboll, right? Brian Daboll's the new coordinator for the Bills, right? It looked like a kind of crummy situation. We don't really know how Diggs was going to fit into it, like all those things, like. And he kind of got talent where he kind of got all the production to where the talent was. Again, I'm not saying that he's Diggs, but I'm saying that if you're going to take a shot that can make a difference. Those two stats make a huge difference. And those types of stats are really skill-based stats. And so those would be the things that I would look for and say, hey, like this is a shot that you can take to really change your. And you know what? Listen, everyone, it's funny because everyone wants to take the shot at like wide receiver 8. That's like, oh, this guy could be like an elite difference maker for like, everyone wants to take this wild swing on an upside guy at wide receiver 8. But then when he's wide receiver 42, everyone's like, no, I'm not interested. Like, no, that's exactly where you should take the swing, that big swing. So that would be my thought there on him.
Last one. I also think the narrative that the 22 class is weak and the 23 draft is super strong is a little overblown.
Yeah, we'll see, right? I think the pedigree is going to matter. I mean, if you don't have a first round running backs, and if you don't have top 10 quarterbacks, you struggle to be a really good class, right? I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. So I think that's going to hold this class back ultimately is kind of, maybe they sneak 2 guys in the top 10 and, I don't know, can you get 2 running backs in the first round and ultimately feel better about that? I think that's unlikely, but possible, I guess. So those would be the things that I'd kind of look for. But I do think like if the 2023 class is going to be this overblown, like we were talking about this earlier, like I'm going to be a seller of those picks. Right, because if everyone wants the picks, right, and
if you're giving up a known strong player, and it's like, well, I'm taking out the risk. What if it's not? Right. What if I pick the wrong player? What if things change during the draft process or by December or whatever?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What we do know, what I think is important though, is to assume market neutrality, and then the more data points you have about the current class, assess that class. We don't know, like the assumption. What I hate is that everyone assumes that all the eligibility comes out, which A, doesn't happen, B, there's always some surprises. And so you get to it, and even if you like the class, then you're getting to January, do they declare? I mean, Justin Ross is one good example. He's a part of this class. He was a freshman phenom and a stud player, and then he has a neck injury and condition that we didn't know if he's going to play football again. He ends up coming back to Clemson. He's not on the same top 10, round 1 sort of track right now. And he was not a part of the draft class that people 3 years ago assumed. So that's just one example. But this whole assumption that, like you said, I mean, if it's a stud quarterback or running back class, then that helps. But just know there's a lot of variables. Devy quarterbacks are super risky. Super risky. Just 2 words: Christian Hackenberg. So it takes a leap of faith. And so I like to assume that if I can get future first, I like that. Whether I'm projecting or doing my best squint and saying that it's going to be a great class or a bad class, just because it's an insulated class and an insulated pick. And then assess this class and now, unless you get a nice deal, there's no harm, no downside in just waiting. And yeah, there are classes. 2016 strikes me as one where you really couldn't get out of 110, 111 for a future first. But that is so rare in a particular class. So, and that's when people were gobbling up day 3 running backs in that range. So it could happen this year, but it's unlikely historically to actually occur. So just wait, assess this class, And I wouldn't assume dread or hero and rainbows for 23, 24, whatever, because we're just not that good at prognosticating. We're better likely to predict the weather 3 Tuesdays from
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
In this episode, we discussed Kadarius Toney 2 or 3 different times, talked about tight end as well as roster construction through a lot of those. We talked about some pivots from CeeDee Lamb, and of course at the top talked about Calvin Ridley and the NFL Combine upon us. Thursday, Friday are those critical days where we're going to get all the data points. You can have your TV on pretty much all afternoon and evening and watch all the drills back to back with the players and the profiles that are going to be a part of the 2022 NFL Draft Class. Jordan McNamara, I am Chad Parsons. Until next time, good luck in your dynasty wins.
Hey, our hearts go out to Ukraine.